Today we're looking at a favorite passage of mine from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 12 and 13. The reason I like it so much is as a person in recovery, I identify heavily with some of the things that Paul is saying here. And whether or not you have experienced struggles with those sorts of things, I think you'll find value in it too. Let's jump right in and look at verse 12. All things are lawful for me, but not everything is useful or beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. That's my translation of 1 Corinthians 6:12. So he makes this great point. Just because I can do a thing doesn't mean that I should do a thing. It may not be good for me, and in fact, it may come to a place where it rules me, it dominates me, it has control over my life and my will. Not a great thing, right? Let's take a look at it in Koine. Panta moi exestin, al ou panta sumfere. So let's start with the first half. All things are lawful for me, panta moi exestin. Panta, all things, moi, to or for me in the dative. Exestin, it is lawful or it is permissible. Alla ou, but not, right? So we have a negation after the contrast. But not panta, all things, sumfere. Pharaoh is I carry or I bear. Sum is together with. In other words, all things don't come together for me. Even though I can do all things, they don't fit together in my life necessarily. Pretty awesome stuff. The next part, panta moi existin, same exact phrasing from the first. Alla uk ego, but I. Then we get this fantastic word, exousias thesomai, future passive. But I shall not be placed under the authority of anything. I shall not be dominated or ruled by anything. So he gives us the same assertion twice, right? Panta moi exestin. All things are lawful for me. All things are permissible for me. But he has two very different caveats, right? The first one, but not everything comes together and serves me well. Not everything is beneficial. And the second one, but I will not allow anything to rule over me. I'm not going to be dominated by anything. Even if I can do it, I will avoid it for the sake of not becoming subject to it. Pretty great stuff. But let's go back to the first part, the repeated phrase, panta moi existin. All things are lawful for me. The question is, are all things lawful for me? And let's take me out of the picture and go to Paul. When Paul writes, all things are lawful for me, is that true? Are all things lawful for him? Well, not if he's living in the world that we know he lived in. There are laws to which he is subject. And in the world today, there are laws to which you and I are subject. All things are lawful to me. I can murder, I can steal, I can embezzle from my employer. I can do anything I want. All things are lawful for me. Obviously, that's not the case. So what is he saying? There are two general possibilities that get laid out. One is that Paul is paraphrasing his detractors. Like his critics say, this guy says you can do anything you want. Why? Because this is Paul, the trained Jewish rabbi, who extensively in multiple books talks about how for believers it's okay for you to eat pork, etc. You don't have to keep kosher anymore. You don't have to worry about that. His detractors would say, this guy is a libertine. This guy thinks he can do whatever he wants, that the rules don't apply to him. So one argument is that when he says, panta moi existin, he is paraphrasing his detractors. Critics say about me that I say I can do whatever I want. But I understand not everything is beneficial for me or useful, and I certainly understand that I won't let anything come to dominate me. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that what he's saying is, in a very real sense, you can do what you want to do, or you can try to do what you want to do, even if it isn't lawful, right? We still have crimes in the world, even though we keep passing laws against crimes. right? We see things happen all the time where we hear about criminal activity right under the nose of the people who are supposed to be watching out for it. And someone without fail says, well, there ought to be a law. Well, the person just broke 16 laws. One more law wasn't going to stop them. So perhaps what he's saying is that no matter what the law says, I can still do or try to do whatever I want to do. There are things that I can do. It doesn't mean that I should do them, because it doesn't mean that they're going to serve me well, that they're beneficial for me. It doesn't mean that they won't come to dominate my life if I allow myself to fall into that trap. Of the two, which one do you think is more likely? Is it a combination of the both? Who knows? Let's move on and take a look at the sort of things that Paul says can be undertaken but not be beneficial and can even come to dominate one's life. Here's verse 13. Food for the belly and the belly for food, and God shall do away with both. But the body isn't for fornication or immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So look at what he says. He says the belly and food and fornication are the kind of things that he uses as the ready examples of the things that you might be drawn to that may not serve you well, and in the long run you may find yourself serving rather than being served by. So it's the appetites of the belly and the appetites from below the belly, let's say, that can really motivate someone to act against their own self-interests. As a lifelong fat kid, I appreciate something that I heard a fitness expert say one time, like you can't outrun a donut. So as much as you want the donut, the amount of exercise that it takes to work off the donut, it's a losing proposition. You're always going to be better off skipping the donut than eating the donut and then trying to go run off the donut. So these appetites, these hungers of the belly and below will draw us to do things that will tell ourselves, it'll be okay, I can do this thing, but it may not be good for you. And you may get to a place where you no longer want to do it, but find yourself doing it anyway. So hungers, wants, lusts, the screaming of some empty place in us that we try to fill up with stuff, it could be what he's talking about. How can we find out? How can we know? Well, look at what he says in the second half of the verse. Your body isn't for fornication or immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. He's going to go on next in verses 14 through 20 and make a strong case that if you're a believer, if you're a part of his intended audience, these Corinthian Christians, that your life is so intrinsically and inextricably joined together with the life of Christ that the things that you might throw yourself into if you were unattached no longer make any sense for one who is joined together with Christ. And he says just prior to that, in the beginning of verse 13, these things that you're seeking to feed and the things with which you seek to feed them are temporary at best, because God's going to do away with both the belly and the food that goes into the belly. So pretty fascinating stuff. If you want a good exercise, go back and not try and outrun a donut. Go back to 1 Corinthians 6 and read 12 and 13, but then read on 14 through 20 and look at that argument that he makes. You may even want to read the little paragraph just before 12 and see some of the interesting things that he says about the hungers, the wants, the lusts of the human being that we all share in common, that we have to come to master so that they don't master us. Great stuff. Till next time, Cars Kai Grace and peace to you.